Evening, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Music Den. I'm your host, Armando Venditti, and in this episode of the Music Den, I'm going to be doing and ranking the album segment. And I'm going to be ranking the studio albums of Pink Floyd guitarist and co-lead vocalist David Gilmour. Now, David Gilmour was born David John Gilmour on March 6, 1946, in Cambridge, England. He is considered to be, if not one of the best guitarists that modern music has ever produced. He has been with the band from 1968 to 1995 when he dissolved the band after the Division Bell tour. Now, the way he came about joining Pink Floyd, he was a friend, of Syd Barrett, Syd Barrett being the lead guitarist, singer, and main songwriter for Pink Floyd. Syd Barrett, after the release of Piper at the Gates of Dawn, started experimenting with LSD. And once he started using LSD, never really fully recovered from it. Basically, it basically fried his brain. And he started to become more erratic in terms of showing up for performances, for tapings of shows. So it was brought up that they would bring in David Gilmour, to fill in for him when they would go on the road for tours, and that Syd Barrett would remain at home and write songs and record in the studio with the band, much like the Beach Boys have done with Brian Wilson. For a brief period of time, Pink Floyd were actually a five-piece, but this was very short-lived, very short-lived. It got to the point where they just unceremoniously ousted Syd Barrett from the group, thereby David Gilmour taking over lead guitar and co-lead vocals in the band. Now, they released A Saucer Full of Secrets in 1968, and they went on to record 7 more albums between 68 to 72. Pink Floyd released, my apologies, their seminal eighth album, Dark Side of the Moon, in March of 73. Now, this album, if most of you know, all of you know, that this album launched them into the stratosphere in terms of popularity, in terms of sales. They toured the material for Dark Side of the Moon as early as 72. The original idea for Dark Side of the Moon was called Eclipse. After Dark Side of the Moon, Roger Waters had stated that he knew that they were never going to be that band of brothers, quote unquote, again, due to the success of Dark Side of the Moon and the strain that they were put under. They went on to record Wish You Were Here, 75. Fantastic album. Followed by Animals, and then in 77, and then The Wall in 79. David Gilmour released his debut album, self-titled, in 78. He would then follow that up 6 years later with his sophomore release of About Face. By 83, Pink Floyd were not active. They released the final cut in 82, and at that point, they did not want to tour with each other anymore. So basically, they were finished by 84. Roger Waters would go on to quit the band officially in 85. But again, for this episode, I will be ranking David Gilmour's 4 studio albums. And it's got to be said, I was surprised that he only recorded 4 studio albums. Given the fact that he's been in the business as long as he has and is such a prolific performer and a fantastic guitarist and songwriter, I am surprised that he only released 4 albums, but there you go. So for this, to start this off, I am going to start the ranking with number 4. And for me, number 4 is About Face. From 84. This album was produced by Bob Ezrin, who had previously worked. It was produced by Bob Ezrin. Sorry, it's late, guys. It's after 10:30 here. Bob Ezrin and David Gilmour. Bob Ezrin, as I was trying to say very badly, worked with Gilmour and Floyd on The Wall. Bob Ezrin does keyboard work, does some orchestral arranging on the album. Songs of note on the album are Until We Sleep, which is, I guess, one of the more, progressive type of tracks on the album. Very guitar heavy. Very textured in terms of guitar work. Very heavy in terms of presentation, in my opinion. But a fantastic track. Gilmour has a very distinct guitar tone. It's like when you hear him play, you know it's him playing. Like, it's undeniable when you hear him. Other songs of note on this album are Murder, which was inspired by the murder of John Lennon. The single from the album was that I remember hearing was Blue Light. There was a video release for it. And it's more of a dance / disco kind of track with percussion overdubs and a horn section, but very good, thickly layered guitars. Okay. And also Gilmour was also known to do instrumental pieces on his albums. And in this case, the instrumental piece on this album is called Let's Get Metaphysical. Again, another great guitar-laden track. Other performers who are on this album are Jeff Porcaro, drummer from Toto, Sam Brown, who would go on to have a solo career, modest, successful solo career. Pete Townsend from The Who provided lyrics for 2 tracks, Love on the Air, which is a very beautiful, mid-tempo, melodic piece. What I like about Gilmour's vocals is he can go very soft and he does a lot of good harmony work with his vocals. And another track that starts off side 2 on About Face is another track that Townsend provided lyrics for, which is called All Lovers Are Deranged. Okay. So, very interesting. Another track, which is near the end of the album, at the end of the album, it's called Near the End. It's a very somber piece, very moody piece of music. Beautiful. I don't know if I mentioned this. Michael Kamen also contributes orchestral arrangements to the album. He also performed with Pink Floyd on the final cut. He took Rick Wright's place when Rick Wright was unceremoniously kicked out of the band by Roger Waters in 1979. The album, this was going to be higher up on my list. But the more I listened to the other albums, it went further down the list. Gilmour has said as recently as 2015 in an interview that although he likes some of the tracks on the album does suffer from like an 80s production style. Um, I mean, it's kind of weird that most of the albums that came out in the 80s kind of fell into that trap of, unfortunately, sounding from that time period. It's got to be said. Um, Moving on to number 3 for me is the debut. Released in 78, produced by Gilmour on his own. It's a much more FM radio friendly album in terms of a lot of rhythm guitar, a lot of harmony guitar on it. Gilmour plays a bunch of instruments on the album. He's a multi-instrumentalist, bass player, guitar player, keyboard player, percussion. So, I mean, he basically could do an album all on his own, basically like Prince would do, but he worked with other people. Notable tracks on the debut are Mahalis, which is an instrumental. Most of these tracks lie in around the 5-minute range. So basically, Gilmour always said that rock music meant that there were no rules when you were recording. So you could basically do whatever you want musically, and as long as you liked it, that's what counted. And it has to be said, sorry, this was a time when artists did albums for themselves. They didn't do them for the record company. They did them for themselves. If they liked it, that's what counted. I mean, obviously, record companies have to make money, have to get return on their investment. But this was a time in the 70s where artists were allowed to explore and do different things. But back to the ranking on this album, other tracks of note are, which this was the only single release from the album, There's No Way Out of Here, which talks about someone who is in a relationship, whether it be personal, business, marriage, and they feel like they have no way out of what they, I guess, consider to be a bad situation. Other songs of note are Short and Sweet, which was written by David Gilmour and Roy Harper. Two other instrumental tracks on the album are Raise My Rent and Definitely. It's got to be said, Gilmour's ability to write a melody, even just his instrumental pieces, are brilliant. It's unreal. It's unreal. I don't know if I mentioned this, but on About Face, just to backtrack just a wee bit, it sounds to me like he's having a great time on this album. That he just wants to let go, and he rips on the guitar on About Face. He had said in interviews that he wanted to step out from the shadow of Pink Floyd, and that he kind of felt restricted in being in Floyd, and he just wanted to let go on this album. And he also did too, I believe, with the debut. So other songs are No Way and I Can't Breathe Anymore, which he did I Can't Breathe as recently as the 2000s on tour. So that's number 3. Number 2 is Rather That Lock. released in 2015, his last studio album. This album is a rock album, but there's more jazz and ambient um, um, textures on here. Um, the album to me starts off, it sounds like it's starting like basically a day in the life of an individual. You know, get up in the morning, go to work, do your thing, come home, you know, etc. And the experiences that one has throughout their daily life. Starts off with the ambient instrumental, very textured piece called 5 a.m. Um, Beautiful keyboard work on it. Great work. This album was produced by Gilmour and Ray Manzarek from Roxy Music. I believe it's either Ray Manzarek or Ray Manzarek. Pardon me. The album again starts off with 5 a.m. And to me, listening it, I was reminded today how beautiful this album is. Just great music. Just it's the kind of album, and you probably figured out what my number one album is. But Rattle That Lock is the kind of album where you can put it on, whether you're alone or whether you have company, but you can put it on. If you're alone, you put it on, turn off all the lights, and the only light that's in the room is coming off of the stereo components, right? I said yes. I said stereo components, no computers, just you and the stereo and the music coming from the speakers. And it literally washes over you. And it just, these two albums that I'm talking about, or the next one I will talk about, take you on a journey musically, sonically. They're just amazing. The next track after 5 a.m. is the title track, Rattle That Lock, which features Misha Paris on background vocals. Just a feel-good track, you know. Other tracks of note are A Boat Lies Waiting, which talks about the loss of a loved one, of someone important to you in your life, whether it be a friend, a loved one, a partner, and missing them immeasurably, which we've all dealt with at some point in our lives. The next track of note for me is In Any Tongue. Again, a good mid-tempo track, really good guitar work on all of his tracks on this album. The next is an instrumental called Beauty. Again, his guitar work is beyond measure, in my opinion. He doesn't play necessarily like fast guitar in terms of like tapping or like, you know, speed tapping kind of thing. He just plays really good, solid rhythm and lead guitar licks that just knock you on your ass, really. After Beauty, the next track is the one where that's more of a jazz oriented track, and it's called The Girl in the Yellow Dress. And this is the more jazz oriented piece on the album. It's like you're sitting in a club watching this singer on stage in a jazz club, and they're just letting it all out, just having a good time, and you're just sitting there having a drink and you're enjoying it. Okay. The last track on the album is another instrumental called And Then. And to me, it's the perfect way to cap off an album. Basically, you're at the end of your day, you come home from whatever day you've had, and you just look at the night sky outside your window, and you've got this music playing in the background, and it's beautiful. Seriously. Coming in at number one, you must have guessed what it is. On an Island. Recorded in and released in 2006. Both this album and the album on this list prior, Rattle That Lock, also feature vocals from David Crosby and Graham Nash. They both do fantastic work on both these albums. But for me, On an Island has got to be the best album that David Gilmour has ever released. Hands down. It's very atmospheric, very laid back, ambient textures all over the place. Not a hard album at all, in the vein of, let's say, The Wall. It's not like that at all. The album starts off with Constellar Horizon, which is an instrumental, very, again, layered keyboards, but also very dramatic. There's a symphonic section that comes in that sort of builds and builds. It's very there's a lot of dynamics going on this track. So you have I guess you could say, ambient keyboards, but you have also a how can I put this diplomatically? Well, forget diplomacy. You have a orchestral section that come in, and it kind of builds and builds and builds and builds and builds in the arrangement. It goes almost like almost up like a staircase kind of a situation, and there's a lot of dramatic effect in it. So it is great. It is great. Title track is next, featuring Graham Nash and David Crosby on background vocals. And it's just a beautiful, peaceful, tranquil piece of music. Beautiful harmonies, beautiful guitar work. It literally takes you on a journey. I can't explain it any better than that. The Blue is next, and it just you almost feel like you want to surrender yourself to just the stresses of the day, leave them behind at the door, and just listen to this track, and you're like floating on a cloud. You're just gone, and you're letting this track and the album take you on the journey, and you don't know where you're going to end up, but you don't care. You just go with it. Another great track is Take a Breath. And it has to be said, Polly Sampson, David Gilmour's wife, writes lyrics for a majority of these two albums. And she also plays on a couple of tracks and sings background vocals. Take a Breath is another album track that she wrote lyrics for. It kind of reminds me of some of the instrumentation that he did on A Momentary Lapse of Reason. Can't explain any better than that. Another instrumental is Red Sky at Night, which features some fantastic saxophone work on this track from Gilmour. He also plays sax. Go figure. He's not a triple threat, he's a quadruple threat, I believe. So yeah, that's it's great. It's just, this whole album is just, it is a masterpiece. It's got to be said, in my very humble opinion. This Heaven is next. And it just follows in the vein of the Blue, just beautiful, tranquil, ambient type of music. Then I Close My Eyes is another instrumental. And again, he could have done an album of a compilation of all of his instrumental pieces, and it would have sold. At least I would have bought it, but it would have sold. And following Smile is the next track, which is just a very beautiful, almost playful love song to your sweetheart. He's basically saying in the song, how can I make you happy? How can I make you feel better about yourself? And how can I get that smile to return to your face? At least that's what I get from it. I mean, I may be wrong, and I'm sure I'll be told so. A Pocket Full of Stones is another great track on the album. All these tracks, they're very sort of mid-tempo, either ballad type or mid-tempo tracks. There's no heavy hitting tracks on these last two albums, Rattle That Lock and On an Island. I almost see Rattle That Lock as like a continuation of On an Island kind of thing. Yeah, it's On an Island for me, again, as I said, has to be the best David Gilmour album that he's ever released. There's no way around that, in my opinion. But yeah, so that's my list. I will recap. Number 4 is About Face from 84. Number 3 is Self-Titled from 78. Number 2 is Rattle That Lock from 2015, sorry. And number 1 is On an Island from 06. And you can get these albums on Amazon. They're still in circulation. They're not hard to find, and they're not very expensive. I think On an Island is going for like it's $19.99 on Amazon, for example, but you can get them anywhere. So please, down below, down there, please leave your comments. Do you like my ranking? Do you not like my ranking? What album do you like of David Gilmour's? Do you think he's a fantastic guitarist? Do you think he's mediocre, middle of the road? There's no right or wrong answers here. Please hit like and subscribe and hit the notification bell to keep you on top of any new content that I will be putting out. And hopefully you guys enjoyed this ranking. And you guys are taking care of one another and yourselves. And I will be back very soon with another album ranking or another episode. And I just wanted to also let you know that Bill Schuster is coming back on the channel. We're going to be taping 2 episodes. On Friday, we're going to be doing an album ranking of Roger Waters. And we're going to be doing a Pink album ranking. In the future, we're going to be doing an album ranking on Black Sabbath and Rush. So that's coming up in the not too distant future. So again, please let me know down there what you think. And I will bid you a good night. And I will see you very soon. Bye for now.